Hey guys, Mr. Randall here again, and today's video we're going to expand on what we know about algebra and going to talk about what variables are, and then we're going to talk about an independent and a dependent variable is. And as you can see, there's no assignment today because we're going to be breaking this up into a couple days. I would really like you guys just to take a break from it for right now. And then also, if you have the time, I highly recommend going to Khan Academy, independent and dependent variables. What we're doing today is we're just going to write this expression. So we know how to do that. I'm a server at a restaurant and I make $80 a shift plus tips. So that plus tips, how much am I making in tips? It just says plus tips. I could make $100 in tips. I can make no dollars in tips, right? If it's busy or slow, it kind of matters that. So we don't know this value, so that's going to be our variable. But we do know I'm making $80 a shift. So I am making 80 plus tips, which we don't know what it is again, so we're going to make that an x. So there's our expression. So, but now what we're going to look at is kind of what we're talking about today. Now write that as an equation, my total pay. So this is my total pay that I would take home for that shift. So we're going to write that again. But what is my total pay again? Well, that is what I take home. But if we look here, we need something right here. But it depends on what x is. So now we need another variable to have y. Do we see why I have a y there? This x, we don't know its value. So now what my total pay is depends on how much I make in tips. If I make $12, well, we can figure that out easy. But we don't know x, so we will not know y as a result. Okay? And that really gets into what today we're talking about is independent and dependent variables. So, if we look at independent, I have a picture here of the Declaration of Independence. And really, if you're a history buff at all, you know that that was saying that the United States doesn't have to rely on England anymore. And that's kind of what an independent variable is. The variable doesn't depend on another variable. The variable itself will actually decide the output. So think about it as 2 plus x equals something. That x right here, depending on what x is, that will determine the output. That x is the original one we will plug in for. Okay? Well, if we look at now what a dependent clause is, that is the variable that is the output. Right? So if we look right here, that's represented as y. If we look back here, this x is our independent variable because how much I make in tips isn't really dependent on anything. But how much I make in total depends on how much I make in tips. Do we see that? And when we look at that, what we're going to have is it might be a little unclear what we're doing right away, but there is kind of an order. Like if we look at that, it makes sense that my total depends on my tips. My tips don't depend on my total. It goes one way and not the other is a good way to find it. One makes sense, one doesn't. So now, on your math quiz, every problem is worth 5 points. Write an equation that represents your final score. Well, I have it right here for us. 5 times your correct answers makes your total score. Right? So if, let's say it's a question out of 5, if there's 5 questions, if I get 4 right, well, I'll do 4, the number I got correct, times 5, and that'll give me my total score. So I have the equation written down for you already. But now we need to find the independent variable. Well, does your correct answers, the total number correct you get, depend on your score? Or does your score depend on how many you get correct? Well, that second one sounds a lot like it makes more sense. So, the independent is correct. And the total score is your dependent, right? Because your total score is determined off how many you get correct. Right. So now we're going to go on to this last part. On a road trip across the state, you are going 80 miles per hour. Write an equation and identify the independent and dependent variable for the total distance you traveled. All right, well that's a little bit tougher, I would say. But I know I'm going 80 miles per hour. So I'm going to write an 80, first of all. And what does miles per hour mean? Well, I'm going this many miles per hour. Every hour, this is how far I'm traveling. So 80 times how many hours, right? And so that is going to make up the distance I've traveled, right? Because if I'm going 80 miles per hour, well, how many hours will determine how far I've traveled. So let's make that a t. Well, and a good source for this is if you're kind of confused, if we look, this hours is a unit of time, and the traveled isn't. A unit of time is 9 times out of 10. Now, I can't think of a situation off the top of my head where it isn't the independent variable. Time is usually your independent variable. What comes after the time, what results from that time, is the dependent variable. So I kind of gave that away. Right here is our independent. Right here is our dependent. All right. Make sure to look at this Khan Academy for me. You don't have any assignments, so this is what I want you guys to do. Okay? Have a good day, guys.